Hello everyone and welcome to your fourth Android Studio tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to start talking about layouts. So there are three main layouts that you'll be using. The first one is linear, the second one is relative, and the third one is grid. So the first one we're going to work on today is linear layout. So you're going to open up Android Studio, start a new project. In the project we're going to name it linear layout. We're going to leave everything else default. Next, we're leaving that as 4.1. Next, we're going to select an empty activity. Next, we'll just leave this as the defaults. And then we'll wait as it creates itself. Alright, now everything in the status bar is done, so we can start working. So we're going to flip over to activity_main.xml and we're going to go to design. So when you're looking at the design, you see the same thing we saw with our Hello World application. You got a text view that says Hello World. If you look down here in the component tree, it shows relative layout. So currently we have a relative layout. So what a layout is basically a container for your widgets. So right now we have one big relative layout that is the size of the screen. If you had a linear layout, the linear layout would be the size of the screen. Typically a grid layout kind of expands as you use it. So it could be this small if you had only 2 rows. If you had more rows, it would expand as needed. So we're going to flip over into the text and we're going to look. This right here is our XML. So the very first line tells you what version XML and what encoding is. Pretty much just leave that alone. Unless you're more advanced, you won't even need to mess with it. We see that we're using a relative layout, and then we got XMLNS Android schemas, android.com, and XMLNS tools. So these are default values that you don't need to worry about. They're basically, if you've ever done, I think it was called XHTML, you would have to use a doc type, and the doc type you would connect would be connected to a web page. It's kind of the same thing. Just leave these two and don't worry about them. Android ID is the actual way to connect to all the IDs. To all the elements. So using ID activity main, you would be able to see attributes, see values of what's in the relative layout. Layout width match parent and layout height match parent. These right here change the way this element works. So we're match parent right now. So remember how I said the layout was the size of the screen. So the parent of this layout, since there's nothing above the layout, the parent of the layout is the screen. So we're looking at the screen from here to here, from top to bottom. So what match parent does is it basically creates the linear layout to be the size of the screen. You also have fill parent. So if this was fill parent, it would do the same thing. It would match the size of the parent. And then the other option is wrap content. So what wrap content does, if it's a wrap content width, then it would create the width to the size that you need, and then every time you created another element, it would just put the next one beside it until you've gone all the way across. That's kind of a simplistic way to look at it, but that's for the most part how it works. So we're going to change this back to match parent, and you'll notice because I don't have a correct parameter, a row parameter in here, this right here will say rendering problems because it can't render to this because it sees it as broken. So it tells you set to wrap content, set to match parent, or automatically add all missing attributes. So if you hit that, it would fix that. If you hit this, it would make this be match parent. If you hit this one, it would make it be wrap content. So we want match parent, so we'll just click that, and now we're back to how we originally had it. The padding bottom, padding left, padding right, and padding top are all the padding. So this shows how far the text view element is from the screen. So it puts padding in there so that you're not hitting the screen. And if you notice, these are all grayed, but these are green. Why are these grayed and these are green? Well, the reason why is behind the scenes, Android is actually using, if you see that, at dimension / activity vertical margin. So this isn't a real value. If you click on it, it shows you the hidden value. Click on it, hidden value, click on it, hidden value, click on it, hidden value. So if you were to go to your resources and go to your values, you have a dimensions. So over here in the dimensions XML, it gives you actual dimensions, specified dimensions for your margins. So if we were to change the horizontal one to, we'll just say 40 density pixels, and save that, go back into activity main, then you see our width more than doubled, or our margin, our padding from the left moved. But what that also means is you won't be able to place an element to the left side of this line right here, basically. You wouldn't be able to place any element to the left of that because it's hard-coded padding into your actual layout. So I'm just going to put this back to what the standard was. Save that, close that. And let's see, and then we have tools, context. Again, leave that alone. That has to do with your package name. So if you were flipping around through this context is basically just telling you what this activity is. It's a little more advanced than that, but for now that's all I'll say. Then we have our text view, which is our hello world. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and delete this text view. Now that we've deleted the text view, we're still using a relative layout, but this is a linear layout tutorial, right? So once you start deleting relative, you'll notice that in the bottom, it's also deleting the word relative. And when you type in linear, it is also typing in, if I can spell, linear layout. So they change together. The reason why is because it wants to keep its opening container. This right here is all the opening container for it, and the ending container. It wants to keep them the same so that you as programmer don't have to keep track of that. So anything that is put in between this linear to this / linear is going to be part of the linear layout. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some buttons. So to create a button, you're just going to use the code, the word button. Press enter, it'll automatically create Android layout width and Android layout height. So for the width, we're just going to hit wrap content. For the height, we're just going to hit wrap content. So we have a button. If you notice, we have a button, but it's a pretty lame button. I mean, it just sits there. It's just a box, really. So we want to add some text to it. So we're going to type in here Android text. And then we're going to assign it 1 because this is button 1. So if you noticed, whenever I pressed enter and started typing in Android, AutoSense came up and is giving me all sorts of ideas of what I can use. So all of these are called attributes. These are attributes for the button. So any of these attributes can be set to anything other than what they currently are. So like when you're setting your text to text, if you wanted to set the button's max height, if you wanted to set line spacing, if you wanted to set the font, you could set the font. So those are attributes, and the green right here are the values. So basically you're just using the word button, and then you're saying this attribute needs to be this value. Okay. So now that we made a linear layout, there's one other thing we need to do for it to display correctly. If we don't do this, then it will display in a default way. So what I mean by that is if we copy and paste our button, because programmers love copy and paste, so now we have 4 buttons. We're going to name them 4 buttons. So now we have button 1 through 4. So you see it laid it out left to right, which is a horizontal orientation. So if you go back into the linear layout, type in Android orientation, and the 2 values you have are horizontal or vertical. So if you don't assign it an orientation, it'll automatically go to horizontal. If you click on vertical, then it will change them to vertical. You see how they're up and down instead of left and right. So the linear layout is laying them linearly up and down or left and right. So let's see what this looks like when we actually run our app. Okay, our emulator is up and running. And now our application is launching. And now we have our button 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we leave the emulator running in the background, drop back down here, change it from vertical to horizontal, and then we're just going to run it again. Go back to our emulator. And now it is horizontally displayed. That, in a nutshell, is linear layout.